Alice and Dennis had always dreamed of starting a family, imagining happy afternoons filled with laughter, tiny feet running across their home, and bedtime stories whispered under the glow of a nightlight. When Alice found out she was pregnant, their joy was boundless. But as the pregnancy progressed, something seemed different, unexpected. The ultrasound revealed what would become the most defining moment of their lives. Not just one, but 3 babies, triplets. But these weren't ordinary triplets. They were conjoined, sharing vital organs, bound together in ways that made their survival uncertain. Before we get deeper into the story, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from today? Leave a comment below. Shock hit Alice and Dennis like a tidal wave. Their excitement faded into fear, worry, and eventually resentment. The doctors explained that the odds were slim, and even if the babies survived, their quality of life would be filled with unimaginable challenges. Their hopes for the perfect family crumbled. This wasn't the life they envisioned. As the months wore on, Alice withdrew from the world. Dennis grew distant, drowning in work, avoiding conversations about the pregnancy. When the day of the birth arrived, the delivery room was filled with an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional beeping of machines. The sight of the babies, tiny and bound together, left Alice numb. "They aren't ours," Alice whispered to Dennis after the birth, her voice hollow. "This isn't what we wanted. This isn't what we can handle." Dennis, his eyes cold and detached, nodded. They were a mistake. The hospital staff looked on in disbelief as Alice and Dennis walked away, leaving the 3 fragile lives behind without so much as a glance back. The babies, unnamed and abandoned, lay in their incubator, unaware of the world's cruelty, unaware that they had been discarded by the very people who were meant to love them most. But fate had a different plan. In the neonatal intensive care unit, Dr. Amelia Hargrove stood over the incubator, her heart heavy. She had delivered many babies in her career, but none had affected her as deeply as these 3. She saw something in them, something beautiful, something worth saving. They were fighters, clinging to life despite the odds stacked against them. "I'll take care of them," Amelia whispered to herself. Her decision was impulsive, driven by a fierce instinct she didn't fully understand, but she knew in her heart it was the right one. That night, as the hospital filled with the quiet hum of machinery, Amelia signed the papers that would make her their legal guardian. Over the next few months, the triplets, whom Amelia lovingly named Hope, Grace, and Faith, became the center of her world. Despite the medical complexities, Amelia dedicated every waking moment to their care, juggling her duties as a doctor and as a new mother. The triplets were conjoined at the chest, sharing a heart and parts of their digestive system, but their personalities were already distinct. Hope, with her bright eyes, was always curious, reaching for the world around her, even from the confines of their shared body. Grace had a calming presence, often soothing her sisters when they cried, her tiny hand always finding its way to theirs. And Faith, the smallest of the 3, had a fiery spirit, her determination evident in the way she fought to breathe, to grow, to live. Amelia often wondered how anyone could have abandoned them. She understood that their lives would be difficult, but these girls were not mistakes. They were miracles. Every day, she marveled at their strength, their bond, and the way they seemed to complete one another, despite the challenges. As the triplets grew, so did Amelia's love for them. The hospital staff became their extended family, and soon, the story of the conjoined triplets who had been abandoned by their biological parents, but adopted by a doctor, spread throughout the community. People were moved by Amelia's selflessness, by the girls' resilience. But despite the love and care surrounding them, there were always moments of sadness, of heartache. The girls, now old enough to understand their condition, would sometimes ask questions that tore at Amelia's heart. "Why did they leave us?" Hope asked one night as Amelia tucked them into bed. Her voice was soft, but the pain in her eyes was unmistakable. Amelia sat beside them, her hand gently stroking their hair. She had dreaded this question for years, knowing it would come eventually. "I don't know, sweetheart," Amelia said, her voice thick with emotion. "But what I do know is that it wasn't because of anything you did. You are perfect, just as you are." "But it hurts," Grace whispered, her hand gripping Amelia's. "It hurts to think that they didn't want us." At their words, and tears welled in her eyes. She had always known that no matter how much love she gave them, there would be a wound that she couldn't heal, a wound left by the parents who had abandoned them. "I'm so sorry," Amelia whispered, her voice breaking. "I wish I could take away that pain." Faith, who had always been the quietest, spoke up then, her voice filled with a quiet determination. "We have you, Mama, and that's enough." Amelia couldn't hold back her tears any longer. She gathered them into her arms, holding them as tightly as she could. "You are my world," she whispered, "and I'll always be here for you." The years passed, and the triplets continued to grow, defying the odds that had been stacked against them from birth. They attended school, made friends, and lived a life filled with love and support. But the question of their biological parents never fully disappeared. When the girls turned 10, they asked Amelia if they could meet Alice and Dennis. Amelia had always feared this moment. She had protected the girls from the harsh reality of their abandonment for as long as she could, but she knew that they deserved answers. With a heavy heart, she tracked down Alice and Dennis, who had moved to another city and had since had another child, a perfectly healthy son. The meeting was tense, filled with awkward silences and unspoken emotions. Alice and Dennis, now faced with the reality of the daughters they had abandoned, were overwhelmed with guilt and shame. Hope, Grace, and Faith stood before them, not as the mistakes they had once been labeled, but as strong, intelligent, and beautiful girls who had thrived despite the odds. "We just want to know why," Hope said quietly, her eyes locking with Alice's. Alice looked down, unable to meet her daughter's gaze. "We were scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "We didn't know how to handle it. We made a terrible mistake." Dennis, his face pale, nodded in agreement. "We were wrong," he said. "We're sorry." The triplets stood in silence for a long moment, processing the weight of their parents' words. Finally, Grace stepped forward, her voice calm and steady. "We're not angry," she said softly, "but we needed to hear that." As the girls turned to leave, Faith looked back at Alice and Dennis, her expression thoughtful. "We have a family," she said simply, "a real family, and we're happy." The drive home was quiet, the girls lost in their thoughts. Amelia glanced at them in the rearview mirror, her heart aching for them, but also swelling with pride. They had faced their past with grace and strength, and now they could move forward. That night, as Amelia tucked them into bed, Hope spoke up, her voice filled with a quiet peace. "We don't need them," she said, her hand reaching for her sisters. "We have you, Mama, and that's more than enough." Amelia smiled through her tears, her heart full. "You three are my greatest gift," she whispered, "and I'm the luckiest mother in the world." And in that moment, surrounded by love, the triplets knew that despite everything, they had never truly been abandoned. They had been found by a mother who had chosen them, fought for them, and loved them with all her heart. The next morning dawned with the warm, golden light of the sun pouring into the room, casting a soft glow over the faces of Hope, Grace, and Faith as they lay snuggled together in bed. Amelia stood in the doorway watching her girls sleep, her heart swelling with love. It had been a long and difficult journey, but they had made it through together, stronger than ever. But Amelia knew deep down that their story was far from over. A few months later, Hope, Grace, and Faith celebrated their 11th birthday. The party was small, just close friends, and the hospital staff who had become their extended family over the years. As they blew out the candles on their cake, their wishes seemed simple, but Amelia could sense the weight behind them. "Happy birthday, my loves," Amelia said as she kissed each of them on the forehead. "You've grown into such amazing young ladies." Hope, the most outspoken of the three, looked up at her mother. "Do you think we'll ever feel normal, Mama?" Amelia's heart ached at the question. She had always feared the day when her girls would begin to question their place in the world, to wonder why they were different from others. She had prepared herself for it, but nothing could truly brace her for the moment. "You are normal," Amelia said softly, kneeling beside them. "You're extraordinary in your own way, and there's nothing wrong with that." Grace chimed in, her voice more thoughtful. "But people stare at us? They whisper." Faith, who had always been the quietest and most introspective, looked away, her fingers tracing the edges of the conjoined space between her and her sisters. "Sometimes I wish we weren't like this," she said, her voice barely audible, "that we could just be free." Amelia's heart broke at her words, but she understood their longing. While she had always encouraged them to embrace their uniqueness, she knew the world could be cruel, and she couldn't protect them from every harsh glance, every hurtful comment. "Come here," she whispered, pulling them into a gentle hug. "You are perfect, just the way you are. And whatever you feel, I will always be here to listen." As the years passed, the girls began to ask more questions about their future, about the possibility of separation. The medical advancements in the field of surgery had progressed since their birth, and while the risks remained high, it was no longer an impossibility. One evening when the girls were 14, Hope approached Amelia with a seriousness in her eyes that took her by surprise. "Mama, we've been thinking," Hope began, her voice trembling slightly. "We want to look into surgery to see if there's a way we could live separate lives." Amelia felt her breath catch in her throat. The thought of separating them, of undergoing such a dangerous and complex surgery, terrified her. She had always known this conversation might come, but she had hoped it would be much later, or never. "I'm scared for you," Amelia admitted, her voice wavering. "The surgery, it's dangerous, and it could change everything." Grace, sitting beside Hope, nodded solemnly. "We know, but we've been talking about it for a long time. We love each other, Mama, but we also want to experience life on our own terms. We want to see who we are individually." Faith, her eyes brimming with unshed tears, looked up at Amelia. "We don't want to lose each other. We'll always be connected, even if we're apart." Amelia sat down, her hands shaking slightly. She loved them with every fiber of her being, and the thought of losing them, either physically or emotionally, was unbearable. But she also knew she couldn't stand in the way of their desires, their dreams. They were growing up, and they deserved the chance to make their own decisions. "I'll support you, whatever you choose," Amelia finally said, her voice thick with emotion. "But let's make sure we have all the facts, all the information before we make any decisions. This is your life, and it's your choice." The months that followed were filled with countless doctor's visits, consultations, and sleepless nights. The risks were high. Separation surgery for conjoined triplets was unprecedented. The doctors were candid about the dangers, explaining that the shared heart and organs would make it nearly impossible to guarantee success. But the girls were determined. They wanted to live their lives fully, and they were willing to face the risks. One night, as they sat around the dinner table, Hope spoke up. "We've made our decision, Mama." Amelia's hands trembled as she set down her fork, her heart racing. She had been dreading this moment, but she knew it was coming. "We want to go through with the surgery," Hope said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "We know the risks, but we've talked about it, and we believe this is what's right for us." Amelia's eyes filled with tears, and she reached out to hold their hands. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Grace nodded. "We are. We're scared, but we're ready." Faith, always the quiet one, squeezed Amelia's hand. "We'll be okay, Mama. We'll always be together no matter what." The day of the surgery arrived far too quickly. As the girls were prepped for the operating room, Amelia held each of them close, her heart aching with a mixture of fear and love. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You are the bravest girls I've ever known, and no matter what happens, I'll always love you." The girls smiled at her through their tears, each of them holding tightly to her hands. "We love you too, Mama," Hope whispered. "Thank you for everything." The surgery lasted hours, 10 agonizing, excruciating hours. Amelia sat in the waiting room, her hands clasped together, praying silently for their survival. She couldn't imagine a world without them, couldn't bear the thought of losing even one of them. Finally, the surgeon emerged, his face a mixture of exhaustion and relief. "They made it through," he said, his voice heavy. "There were complications, but they're alive." Amelia's knees buckled with relief, tears streaming down her face. But the surgeon's face was still serious, and her heart clenched. "They'll need time to recover," he continued, "and there will be challenges ahead. But for now, they're stable." The recovery was slow and painful. Each of the girls had to adjust to life on their own, to the new reality of being separate for the first time in their lives. There were physical scars, but the emotional ones ran deeper. Amelia watched them with pride and heartache as they learned to navigate their new independence. Hope, always the leader, was eager to explore the world on her own terms, while Grace struggled with the separation, missing the closeness they had once shared. Faith, true to her quiet nature, adapted slowly, but with a quiet strength that reassured them all. But despite the challenges, the girls were resilient. They had faced the unimaginable and come out the other side, stronger than ever. And through it all, Amelia stood by their side, her heart full of love and pride. A year after the surgery, the girls celebrated their 15th birthday, this time as 3 separate individuals. The party was small, just close friends and family, but the joy in the room was palpable. As they blew out their candles, Amelia watched them with tears in her eyes, her heart swelling with love and gratitude. They had come so far, faced so much, and yet they had emerged stronger, more united than ever. "We did it, Mama," Hope said, her eyes shining. "We made it." Amelia smiled through her tears, pulling them into a tight embrace. "Yes, you did," she whispered, "and I'm so proud of you." The road ahead would still be difficult, filled with challenges and unknowns. But as they stood together, arms wrapped around one another, Amelia knew that no matter what the future held, they would always have each other. And in that moment, despite the scars and the pain, their hearts were whole.